Yeah, so my idea was that for the first 15-20 minutes of this session, we could do the meditation on the breath. If you're familiar with another object that you use for developing concentration and prefer to use that, please feel free to do so. Otherwise, you can use the breath. And then yesterday I mentioned a few obstacles that can occur when we do meditation. One is distraction, the mind being distracted away from the meditation object to something else, anything, a thought, a feeling, sensation in the body, a sound, and so on. So anything other than the breath or whatever your object is a distraction. And so when your mind does get distracted away from your meditation object, you need to bring it back. And even if you have to do that again and again and again, it's fine. It's okay. Try not to get frustrated or discouraged or impatient, but really try to be patient and continue to have joyous effort doing the practice and just bringing the mind back again and again. It does take time for the mind to learn to do this, so being impatient with yourself won't help. And if your mind is really, really restless, counting the breath could be helpful. That helps to kind of gives you more to do. It gives the mind more to do, to be occupied. And so then it can be easier to stay on the object if you do that. So you can try counting the breaths. Yeah, so, and then the other main problem is sleepiness or lethargy. And so if you notice that happening, make sure you're sitting up straight, straighten your back, and open your eyes. If your eyes are already open, you can open them even more, and then just focus on one point on the floor or table in front of you, and try not to let your gaze wander elsewhere, otherwise then distraction will happen. And you can also try visualizing light. Yeah, so illuminate yourself, fill yourself with light. See if that helps as well. So those are probably the main problems that we might occur. Oh, and then, yeah, this impulse to move. So if that arises, if you feel the impulse, the urge to move your body, see if you can ignore it the first time. Just keep sitting. And also the second time it comes up. And then if it comes up a third time, then give yourself permission to move. To adjust your position to a more comfortable one. And if you do move, though, do try to be considerate of the people around you. Try not to move in a way that would make a lot of noise and disturb others. So try to do it quietly and mindfully. So those are the main things I mentioned yesterday afternoon. So yeah, so mainly just keep your mind focused on your object, but then have part of the mind, like a little corner of the mind, observing what's happening, like what's actually going on in my mind, and being on the lookout for any of these problems that might occur. And if they do, then apply the antidotes. And before we begin, make sure your motivation for being here and doing this meditation is a positive one, altruistic. So whatever degree of altruism you're able to generate in your mind, even just thinking, yeah, I want to help others as much as I can. Or if you're familiar with the idea of enlightenment, Buddhahood, and can aspire for that, then you can bring that in as well, and wish that this meditation practice and this session will be a cause bringing us closer to enlightenment so that we can benefit all beings in the best possible way. So just take however long you need to generate such a motivation and then go into the meditation itself. So I've got some more things to share, including some advice on how to continue practicing on your own, and then leave some time for questions. There's already some questions here on the table. So it's possible to put the slides up. It's not absolutely necessary, but there were still a few slides I didn't get to. So I'll start by talking about some other problems that, that one, other problems that we can encounter when meditating. So one is discomfort or pain. I already did talk about that yesterday, and shared some advice on dealing with pain from Bhante Gunaratana, but I really summarized what he said. So if you find that helpful and you want to know more, I recommend getting his book. It's actually available on you can get a PDF online of the whole book. And there's a whole, almost a chapter in there about pain and how to work with pain. And then I also thought of this teaching that the Buddha gave about the two arrows you may have heard of. It's in the Pali tradition, a sutra called the Salata Sutra, I believe. And he was talking with some of his disciples and spoke about, I'm just summarizing it, but he spoke about two different kinds of people. One is someone who's just an ordinary, unlearned person. And if they have pain, then they react, getting upset and, trying to escape from it, and then, get caught up in attachment, and so on. So they don't react very well. But then on the other hand, he said a learned, noble disciple, that would be a practitioner, someone who's practicing and has more knowledge and more wisdom. So when such a person experiences pain, they do not worry, complain, cry, and wail. Their mind doesn't give rise to disorder and derangement. They have only painful feelings in the body, but not in the mind. Yeah, so Buddha gave this analogy of the arrows. He said, if you are shot with an arrow, you have an arrow in your body, that's like, of course, very painful. But then if you respond by, all these, disturbing thoughts and emotions, that's like shooting yourself with another arrow. So having two arrows in your body means doubly painful. And so he says that's like if you respond to pain, or whether it's, I think it, it could apply to physical pain as well as emotional pain, any kind of unpleasant experience that happens. So if we respond to that with worry and unhappiness and anger, maybe, and blame, and trying to escape from it and get caught up in maybe drinking and drugging and all those kind of things. So that's just exacerbating the problem. That's just like shooting yourself with another arrow, and doesn't help. And so he's saying instead, have that first pain, like the first arrow, but then learn how to deal with it in a wise way so that you don't increase your suffering. And so the key to doing this is having understanding, having wisdom that understands things as they are, or at least mindfulness, the practice of mindfulness, just being very mindful, very aware of what's happening. Understanding impermanence is very helpful as well, to know that all, your pain as well as your thoughts and your feelings, your emotions, all of these come and go. They're not permanent and fixed. They are impermanent. They're like, the clouds in the sky. They come and they go. They're not going to be there forever. So that relatively simple understanding of impermanence can be enormously helpful when dealing with physical pain as well as emotional pain, any kind of problem that comes along. And there's a book by Bhikkhu Analayo. I can't remember the exact title, but it's about death and dying. Does anyone remember the title? That he pulled out various passages, sutras, as well as passages of sutras, where the Buddha was giving advice on how to deal with pain, how to deal with sickness, how to deal with aging, how to deal with dying and death, and so on. Really beautiful, wonderful book. Something we all need. We're all on our way there. Mindfully facing disease and death. Okay, Bhikkhu Analayo. Yeah. Windhorse, I think it's published by Windhorse Publications. Yeah, that's a, yeah. So in there, there's I think a whole chapter on this this sutra about the arrows and some explanation about it. So some very wonderful advice in that book. And then noise. So it is recommended that if we're practicing meditation, we try to find a quiet place. But that's not always possible. So even here, like, this weekend it's quite quiet, but tomorrow morning at 6 a.m., those big machines you see up the hill, they're going to come alive. Like in a Disney movie, Disney cartoon. You're going to start dancing and making lots of noise, doing lots of work to make our Buddha hall come alive. So, yeah. I mean, we try to find a quiet place. We try to have peace and quiet. And this is especially recommended for the practice of calm abiding or serenity, shamatha meditation. It is recommended that you try to find a quiet place. But it's hard to find a really quiet place. Because I've done retreat in places that are way up in the mountains or deep in the forest, far away from towns and cities and so on. But there's always noise. There's birds, insects, planes, and sometimes it's so quiet you can even hear your own heartbeat or your breathing. Or if you have tinnitus like me, then that's constant, 24/7. You can never get away from that. And so, so just don't expect that you can have a totally 100% quiet place. And so it's good to learn how to deal with noise, because the problem isn't so much the noise, but it's how our mind reacts to it. Getting usually either attachment in some cases, oh, that's nice music, I like that, or aversion, oh, why can't they stop doing that, making that noise? So this is the main problem, attachment and aversion. And so we need to learn how to deal with those states of mind. Of course, it's not easy, but there are tools, there are remedies to dealing with attachment and aversion. And you can also be just kind of creative and find your own ways of dealing with noise. I was thinking this morning about, I was living in Israel for a while and in a small apartment, and right next door to me was the Palestinian man. He actually owned the apartment. He was like the landlord. And he was a musician and a composer. And he played this instrument called oud, which is like a guitar. And he was playing all day long, sometimes into the night as well, sometimes even the middle of the night. It was quite hard for me because I really like silence. And I can't tell him, stop playing. That's his livelihood. And so I came up with this idea that helped. Because I have a brother who plays. He plays guitar, and he's not a musician, but he just plays as a hobby. And so I thought, well, if I was in my brother's house and he was playing his guitar, I wouldn't be annoyed. He's my brother. I love him. I'm happy if, this is something that makes him happy. And he's my host. I can't complain if I'm in his house. And so so then I would say to myself, this man was my brother. Yeah, I would just imagine he's my brother. And that completely changed. That completely changed my attitude. Yeah. So when I heard him playing, I thought, oh, that's my brother playing. And that really helped. So for me in that situation, that was something that helped. So you can find, yeah, some kind of trick to play on your mind that will help you to not be bothered by the noise. So it's really, yeah, just a question of doing something internally. I mean, of course, if you can stop the noise or get away from the noise, that's fine to do, but that's not always possible. And you can also use earplugs, or there are these noise canceling headphones. Some of us are contemplating getting those here because we're going to have this construction work going on for the next year or so. And then unusual experiences. I talked a bit about that yesterday in answer to Anne's question. So just understand that this is something that can happen, especially in the beginning when you're first starting to practice meditation. It's something unusual for your body and your mind to be doing this, so it can kind of make things unbalanced and cause unusual experiences. So they usually stop after a while. So that's helpful to know so that you don't worry, get freaked out about it. And if they don't stop, if they continue, or maybe get worse, then it could be helpful to consult a teacher, because there might be something you're doing that's not correct, and you can make a change in that. Okay, then the next one, last one on this list, is expectations and discouragement. So this is a killer. Having expectations of meditation. One of my teachers, Lama Yeshe, used to say to us, don't have any expectations when you meditate. But it's very hard not to. I mean, I think in our life as human beings, whatever we do, there's always some expectation of getting something, being happy, feeling good, getting people to like us. We always have expectations, even though, we may not be aware of them. They may be kind of unconscious or subconscious, but they're always there. For example, friendships, relationships, we expect the other person to make us happy, to be always a certain way, never another way, and to have happiness forever after in this relationship. And having that kind of expectation actually leads to suffering and problems. When problems arise in a relationship, it's very helpful to ask yourself, what did I expect? What were my expectations in this relationship? And then ask, was that realistic? Was it realistic and fair for me to have those expectations? But that's not what we usually do. We usually get angry at the other person and blame the other person. Why aren't you being the way you're supposed to be? Why aren't you making me happy the way you're supposed to be? And so on. So the cause of a lot of problems and conflicts in relationships is because of expectations. Each person is bringing their own expectations into the relationship. And usually we don't sit down and make a contract, This is what I expect of you. Do you agree? Will you sign here? So it's more like internally, secretly in our mind, we have these expectations. And, the other person doesn't even have a chance to agree. And often they are quite unrealistic. So anyway, that's one thing. But then when it comes to meditation, we probably have expectations as well. Especially nowadays, now that meditation is much more kind of famous and popular. And I don't know about movies. There's probably movies and books and magazines and things on the internet that actually promote expectations. I was just thinking about You sometimes see, like in a yoga magazine or even in an article about meditation in Time magazine, they'll have a photo of somebody, usually a very attractive young woman or man, sitting on the grass in meditation position, looking completely peaceful and blissful. And I was wondering, are they really meditating, or is this just a model, that's being paid to sit there looking blissful and beautiful? Probably the latter. If you take a photo of a real meditator, they're probably like this. Like, maybe that's exaggerated. Sometimes we might appear peaceful and blissful, but not always. So anyway, that kind of thing, and then stories we read and hear and so on, these can cause us to have expectations. There's stories about, people having these amazing experiences, out of body experiences and visions and this and that and so on. And so, that kind of story can come into our attitude about the practice of meditation. So we're sitting there expecting to have such experiences and kind of grasping, waiting for them. I had this funny experience once. I was teaching I was in India, and in some of the Dharma centers there, we have these 10-day courses, Introduction to Buddhism and Meditation. So people are there for 10 days, and we have a schedule like this, giving teachings, and also they're having meditations. And we try to get them to keep silence, but that's not always easy. So I had spoken early on in this course about how important it is not to have expectations when you meditate. Just try to be free of expectations. And on day 3, during a break, this one young man came up to me and he said, "I've been meditating for 3 days now and nothing has happened." And I said, "What did you expect was going to happen?" And he said, "Well, something should have happened by now. Other people are having experiences and nothing's happened to me. So I'm not sure I want to keep meditating." So that's a clear example of what can happen if we have expectations. And I couldn't help but wonder how he knew that other people were having experiences, because they were supposed to keep silence. Of course, they sometimes go off in the forest and have chats, but maybe it was his imagination. Maybe he's kind of opening his eyes and looking around the room and seeing that some people look kind of peaceful and happy, and he's kind of fantasizing, oh, that person is, gone to another realm, or, they're enlightened already, or something like that. But this is what our mind can do. I mean, that's kind of an extreme example of that. But And one of the dangers of having expectations is discouragement. Then we feel discouraged and we feel like giving up, even after 3 days. Yeah. So, but on the other hand, if we do have a sense of discouragement or disappointment, if that's happening, then that's a sign that we did have expectations. That we may not have been aware of. So then it's good to check, well, what did I expect? What were my expectations? And was I right to have these expectations? Were they realistic? So it is kind of hard not to have expectations, because Buddhism does talk about, enlightenment, nirvana, the bliss of samadhi, and so on. And we have all these stories about people like Milarepa and so on. So yeah, we're kind of prompted to have expectations. But then on the other hand, if you really pay attention to the teachings, you realize that, well, people like Milarepa and the Buddha and so on, they spent a long time, and it was a long, hard slog to reach the states they reached. And so there are results of meditation. There's incredible results that can come from meditation, but they take time and energy and hard work to reach. And so we don't attain those results by grasping, by being greedy and grasping and expecting, okay, this session, this is going to be the one. This is the time when I'm going to get a nirvana. I'm going to get nirvana this session. I mean, that's exaggerated, but sometimes it can happen like that. Especially if we do start to get a little tingle of bliss, we might think, oh, it's going to happen. It's about to happen in the next minute. So that's not the way those realizations come. We have to spend a lot of time and energy learning and studying, practicing, and not just sitting on the cushion, but lots of other complementary practices like purification. That's why in the morning we do the practice of the 35 Buddhas, and there's other purification practices as well to kind of clear out all the old bad energy we've created in this life and past lives. So that has to be cleared away. And another practice that's important is creating merit, accumulating merit. So we do that by making offerings and helping other people, doing the dishes, cleaning the toilets, and so on. So there's these complementary practices to meditation: purification of the negative energy and accumulation of positive energy. So those need to be done as well as just sitting in formal meditation. And also study. We have to make sure we have a correct understanding of enlightenment, nirvana, what those goals are all about, and what are the steps to reach them, and clear understanding of the path. So we need to put in quite a bit of time and energy to accumulate all those causes. And if we do, eventually at some point the results will come. Expectations, if we do notice expectations in our mind, it's good to look at those and understand what they're all about. They're most probably related to our ego, to our sense of self, I, big fat I want this to happen to me. And it may not always be with the right reason. It could be, I want to be able to tell all my friends what happened, what I've experienced, and maybe I'll become famous. I'll go on TV and I'll be interviewed by CNN and BBC and all these kind of things. So often it's, big fat I behind the expectations and worldly kind of aspirations. And then attachment. Attachment and grasping. And so like I say, there are results from the practice of meditation, but those will not be attained by having ego and attachment and grasping. So those kind of attitudes themselves are like hindrances, obstacles. They put up barriers to attaining the results. So if you do notice expectations, attachment, grasping for certain experiences to happen, just understand that those are obstacles. That's a kind of obstacle we need to overcome. And again, attachment. There's lots of different antidotes to attachment, remedies for attachment. So we need to learn those and apply them and work on them. And also understand it takes time to overcome these disturbing emotions, these disturbing attitudes. We can't do it in just a couple of days or weeks or months. I mean, sometimes, I don't know, people may have the idea that Buddhist monastics are free of attachment. Just because we shave our heads and put on robes and take vows, that we don't have any more attachment. But I don't know. How many people in this room still have attachment? Yeah. So you see, it's. I mean, we're working on it, of course. That's one reason we're here. We want to overcome our attachment, but it takes time. And in fact, we won't be completely free of attachment until we, well, we have to realize emptiness. We have to get a realization of emptiness, which is quite a hard thing to do. And we have to have a direct, non-conceptual realization of emptiness. And that's the antidote. That's the real remedy. That's the thing that really eliminates attachment. But it still doesn't go away all at once. We kind of shave off layers of it, the most gross first, and then the subtler and subtler and subtler. So it takes a long time and a lot of work to be completely free of attachment. But in the meantime, of course, we can learn antidotes to attachment and apply those and gradually decrease the strength of the attachment in our mind. So it's still there. It may come up a little bit, but we can recognize, oh yeah, that's attachment, and easily put it aside. And it's the same with other emotions as well, like anger, anxiety, depression, fear, worry. So all of these things, they do take time to overcome. So I just wanted to read something here this is from my book, How to Meditate. Positive changes do not appear suddenly out of the blue, but develop slowly, gradually, little by little each day. So be patient with yourself. Remember, just making an effort to understand and control the mind is meditation. So just trying to meditate is a good thing to do, even if you're struggling to stay awake and keep your mind focused and free of attachment and so on. Just trying to do that is a good thing to do. So you need to appreciate your effort. Feel good about what you're doing. Also, new meditators sometimes have the impression that their negative minds are getting worse, not better. And they may even think that meditation is the cause of that. This does happen. You know, people sometimes think, oh, before I started meditating, I didn't have so many disturbing thoughts. And now I'm trying to meditate and my mind is just completely crazy. So they may think meditation is causing their mind to become crazier, which is probably not the case. And they actually talk about this in the teachings, and they use the analogy of washing clothes. If you have really, really filthy, dirty clothes, and you put them in a bucket of water, and before you put your clothes in, the water is nice and clean, and then you put your clothes in, and the water gets really disgusting and gray and dirty. And well, I mean, that dirt, that was in the clothes. And so you have to be able to see the dirt in order to get it out. You can't expect to wash clothes and not have any contact with dirt. Of course, we put clothes in the washing machine. We don't have to don't deal with them. But in some parts of the world, you still have to use a bucket of soapy water. But anyway, the process of getting dirt out of the clothes is a gradual thing. Yeah. So first the really gross dirt comes out, and then you keep scrubbing, and then the subtler dirt, and then finally you get all the little bits of dirt. And so, if we put dirty clothes into a bucket of water, it would be foolish to blame the soap and the water and the scrubbing for the dirt. Yeah. The dirt was there in the clothes. So the process of washing merely reveals what is already there and is the right method for completely removing the dirt. So similarly, meditation is the way to purify the mind of what's already there. Yeah, the disturbing thoughts and emotion, they're already there in our mind. Maybe we didn't notice them before we started meditating, but meditation makes us, kind of they're right in front of our face. We can't avoid them. And so the problem isn't meditation. The problem is we're just seeing what was already there in our mind that we need to work on. So we need to be patient, keep practicing, don't give up, and also be kind to ourselves. Because another problem that we Westerners are prone to is self-hatred and self-criticalness. So when we see disturbing thoughts and emotions in our mind, then we can sometimes beat ourselves up and have thoughts like, oh, I'm so bad, I'm so horrible, I'm disgusting, and I'm the worst person in the world, things like that, which is probably not true. But so, we need to look at those kind of thoughts and do a reality check And yeah, be kind and compassionate to ourselves. Although that itself may not happen immediately, we need to work on that. There's a psychologist, Kristen Neff, who spent 10 years doing research on self-compassion and wrote a book about it, which is really excellent. So if you do have a problem with that, I recommend her book. She also has a website with guided meditations and other resources for how to be more compassionate to yourself. So I think a lot of us need help with that. In fact, I was going to recommend a couple of books on meditation. There's lots of books on meditation, but there's one by Pema Chodron, which has the same title as mine, How to Meditate. But it has a subtitle, A Practical Guide to Making Friends with Your Mind. I really like that. Yeah, we need to be friends with ourselves, friends with our mind, not having this battle going on inside of ourselves. And yeah, she has a whole section about dealing with emotions with some very helpful advice. Yeah, part 3, working with emotions. So if you are struggling with disturbing emotions coming up in meditation, then I recommend that. So I think I'll skip the next slide. The next slide mentions 5 hindrances and their remedies, which is a complicated subject. I did already talk about some of these, but yeah, because we're running out of time. But I can recommend, if you do want to know more about these, the book Following in the Buddha's Footsteps by Venerable Chodron. Well, it's the Dalai Lama and Venerable Chodron. And chapter 7 of that book has a whole section, maybe chapter 8 as well. There's a lot of material in there about the different kinds of hindrances and obstacles that can arise in meditation and how to deal with them. Okay, so let's go to the last slide, because this is probably more what you need right now. So if you do feel the wish to continue practicing meditation when you go home, there's a few tips. So it is good if you can do a practice every day, or at least a few times a week, rather than letting a long period of time go by without doing any practice. It's a bit like going to the gym or doing exercise. You know, if you just do it once a year, whatever benefit you get isn't going to last very long. Whereas if you go every day, even just a little bit, a little bit of exercise every day is very, very helpful. So it's similar with meditation. So if we can do even just a little bit, it doesn't need to be a long period of time, but even just 5 minutes. Lama Yeshe used to say that. Even just 5 minutes of meditation is good. So try to do a little bit every day, or at least a few times a week if you can't manage every single day, so that you keep up that momentum, that energy, and you don't completely forget or lose whatever benefit you've gained from your last period of meditation. And the more we do it, the more we get familiar with the whole practice of meditation and the different aspects of meditation. And so then it gets easier and easier. In the beginning, it may be a struggle, a lot of things to learn, a lot of awkwardness, how to do this, how to do that. But then as we do it more and more, it becomes easier and easier. Like with anything, learning to play a musical instrument, drive a car, play a sport. Yeah, the more you do it, then the easier it gets. And then the second point says join a group and attend group retreats. So I've heard and met a few people who, right from the beginning, were able to practice meditation all on their own, even without a teacher, even without a group. And I'm quite amazed by that, because it's quite hard to sit yourself down and do meditation. If you're the only one in your house, you're the only one in your town, maybe, who's doing it. So I think most people find it beneficial to meditate with others. Yeah. That group energy, other people are sitting there meditating, and that can help you to stay on your cushion and not get up and run away. So if there is a group of people in the place where you live who are meeting and meditating together, then you can join them. There's also now online groups. Kathy, one of our students, Kathy Elton, has this online group that meets every day. Wow, every day, like, yeah, morning and evening. And so you can be anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world, and join that group. And so they do practices based on what we do here at the Abbey. So it's just helpful to have a group of people that you can connect with and practice with. And again, it doesn't have to be every day, but maybe once a week, because there's also this Monday night session based in Spokane. So you can find out how to get in touch with those groups. And it's also good to come for retreats. Come back here to the Abbey or other places where there's a group retreat going on. It's also helpful to get away from your home. Sometimes when you're in your home, maybe it's harder to discipline yourself. You want to run to the refrigerator or turn on the TV or whatever. But when you're in a special place like this, where there isn't a TV anyway, then yeah, and it's all set up. There's a whole group of people organizing things and making a conducive situation for you to meditate. So it's good to do that a couple of times a year, just again to keep up the energy and the momentum. And then the third point says, have a conducive place for meditation. So it is good if you can have a place in your home where you meditate. And it's good to keep meditating in the same place. Some people have a whole room in their home or apartment that they can devote to, like make a little meditation room. But if you don't have a whole room you can devote to that, at least have a space, someplace where you do your meditation every day. Because a certain energy will build up in that place. Your mind will just get familiar with, that's the place where I sit and meditate. And that will make it easier to get into a more meditative state of mind when you sit there. And it's also good to keep that area clean. I mean, in general, it's nice to clean your whole house, but at least try to keep that place clean. Because if it's kind of messy and dirty and smelly, then that'll make it harder to get into a meditative state of mind. And the time to meditate, it's recommended that we do it in the morning, early morning. The earlier the better. Because for one thing, the environment is more quiet usually in the early morning before people are on the road driving to work and sirens and so on. So usually early morning is a quieter time. And then also for ourselves, if provided you had a good night's sleep, then your mind is more alert and refreshed in the early morning rather than at the end of the day after you've had a long, hard day. But you can meditate at any time, whatever is the best time for you. And also you can meditate several times a day. It doesn't have to be just once a day. Oh, another reason it's good to do it in the morning is to get yourself into a good state of mind before you go to work, before you do whatever you do during the day. The day will go better if you start with some practice. And then as for length of time, in the beginning it's recommended that we do short sessions. Again, 5 minutes is good. If you can sit longer, that's better. 10, 15, 20. And then over time, as you get more experience with meditation, you can increase the amount of time. So there's no sort of limit, there's no fixed amount of time that you have to meditate for. It's very much up to you, your ability, and so on. And then if you run into difficulties, check with a teacher. And actually, it is always recommended that you meditate under the guidance of a teacher and not just from reading books or apps or internet, watching things on the internet. That you have a teacher, a living teacher, a reliable teacher who has some experience with meditation, can give you guidance, and you can turn to for help if you do have difficulties. And if you have difficulty meditating on your own, it could also be helpful to find a tape, like a guided meditation, like Venerable Children's book. This is about Lam Rim specifically, meditations on the Lam Rim, guided Buddhist meditations. So ideally, it's for people who have been exposed to the Lam Rim, have learned about it, studied it, meditated on it. But still, a lot of the practices are things that you could probably do on your own, even if you haven't really studied the Lam Rim. But yeah, there are tapes. She did guided meditations, which I think they're online. Yeah, so there's a link in the book that tells you where you can have access to those tapes and listen to them. So some people may find that helpful, to have a voice telling you what to do step by step. And yeah, I think online there's just so many different guided meditations, but you do have to be careful. I don't know, some of the people anybody can put things on YouTube and whatever. So I wouldn't recommend just any any of those, but make sure it's somebody reliable. And then, yeah, so my book, which again you can get on Amazon, and try to get this version because there's an earlier one. It was first published in 1984 and it had a different cover then, but 2015 I made a lot of changes. I revised most of the meditations and I added some new ones. So this is the newest version in 2015, which I think is better than the original. And I was looking up this, was it Jeremy? Is that your name, Jeremy? You were asking about this one part in here. I looked it up. Yeah, so this comes in the meditation on the breath. And it says, another technique when you have distractions, when your mind gets distracted, this is something you can do, is to use your distractions to help you gain insight into the nature of the mind. When a thought arises, instead of focusing on the thought itself, focus on the thinker. This means that one part of the mind, discriminating alertness, which I think is another term for introspection, takes a look at another part, a distraction. The disturbing object will disappear, but hold your attention on the thinker for as long as you can. So I think that's something I got from my teachers rather than myself. And I also have difficulty with some of the things that they talk about. And I think when I read it again and thought about it, I think it's not what I was saying yesterday, that it's focusing on the self, the ego, but rather the mind itself, that which thinks. And my guess is that this technique comes from the Mahamudra tradition. There's one tradition in Tibetan Buddhism called Mahamudra, which is all about, well, there's different aspects of it, but a lot of it has to do with the nature of the mind, just observing the mind and, yeah, eventually getting in touch with the nature of the mind and then the ultimate nature of the mind, emptiness of the mind. And I've always had difficulty with that kind of thing. When I've tried looking at my mind and seeing the nature of my mind, it's very, I don't know what to look for. And another thing they sometimes say is, look at the gap between the thoughts. But whenever I tried to do that, I couldn't see any gap. It's like the thoughts are just like machine gun. So anytime I tried those techniques of looking at the nature of the mind, I wasn't very successful. And I can't help but think that maybe in Tibet, because in old Tibet, you know, they didn't have airplanes and cars and internet, and it was pretty quiet and spacious. And maybe in that kind of situation, you know, sitting quietly, it's easier to see your mind and the nature of your mind. But nowadays, I think it's much harder with our present life. And I read the Dalai Lama was talking about how he once was in retreat in Ladakh. So Ladakh is like Tibet, you know, it's way up in the mountains and really quiet and peaceful and remote. So he was somewhere doing retreat, and he managed to get a kind of experience of the nature of his mind. So I think, yeah, you need kind of special conditions and to be a special person to be able to actually do that, to be able to catch and get a glimpse of the nature of the mind. So if you have difficulty with that, don't worry. I have difficulty with it too, and I think it is hard. Okay, so let's start with these questions and then see if there's more time. So one question is, would pity be considered a form of compassion? This is related to the story yesterday of the mother of the beheaded journalist and his executioner. Yeah, so she used the word pity, and if you look in the dictionary, it does say that pity and compassion are the same thing, but some people distinguish pity and compassion, and I tend to favor that view. Stephen Levine, one Buddhist, well, he's passed away now, but he was a Buddhist practitioner and teacher, and he did a lot of work with dying people and wrote a number of books about, you know, helping dying people. In one of his books, he distinguished pity and compassion in a really beautiful way. He said, when our love touches another person's suffering, that is compassion. When our fear touches another person's suffering, that's pity. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. That there's more fear involved in pity. It's almost like, oh yeah, I can see you're suffering, but I don't want to get too close. It's scary. It might rub off on me. I don't want to suffer too. And so there's a kind of distance, maybe even condescension, like I'm up here and I'm okay and you're down there and you're miserable. A little bit of arrogance there. So that's, I mean, it all depends on how you define words, but there's definitely that state of mind that I've seen it in myself, and I'm sure many other people as well. So that's more like pity, whereas compassion, you're connected with the other person. You're on the same level. You're not condescending towards the other person. You're not afraid of getting close and getting involved and doing what you can to help them. So if we look at our own experience, we can probably find moments when we've had genuine compassion, so we know what that's like. There's probably other times when we had pity and fear, so we know what that's like. So we try to have more genuine compassion and less pity. But when she used this word pity, I don't know what she meant. She may have meant the same as compassion. Actually, I wanted to look up again what she actually says. Quite extraordinary. I'll just read it. So her name is Diane Foley. Her son's name was James Foley. So they spent 4 hours together. She sat for 4 hours talking with this man who killed her son. Quite extraordinary. And yeah, apparently he spoke about feeling remorse and asking God for forgiveness, but he never said sorry. He was somber and respectful towards me and talked about remorse, but never apologized. So he never actually apologized to her. And then when she, turned to leave this interview, she made a parting comment. I said to him that I hope at some point we could both forgive one another. And he looked confused and said, I don't have to forgive you for anything. And she wasn't completely sure why she said that, but she said it was grounded in her Catholic faith, the foundation of her strength and what has kept her going. She said, I know he doesn't have to forgive me anything, but in that moment, I don't know. I just felt like as people, none of us are perfect. We all do things we regret. If I hate them, they have won. They will continue to hold me captive because I am not willing to be different to the way they were to my loved one. We have to pray for the courage to be the opposite. It's a hard journey to forgiveness, and it's not a done deal, but it's what I aspire to. Yeah, when she's talked about pity, it's because he shared a picture of his family. He has some young children that he'll probably never see again. It made me realize how much he's lost by following hatred and propaganda. It made me pity him. So probably there was some compassion. Maybe she was using that word, but she meant compassion. Could you elaborate more on attachment? It seems to be viewed as negative in Buddhism, but there's a whole school of psychology about its importance for healthy relationships. Yeah, so I have heard about that the way attachment is used in psychology, for example, especially the mother-child relationship, that attachment is considered essential for a child to even to survive and to grow and develop in a healthy way. And I agree. And I think the Dalai Lama agrees too. But when we talk about attachment in Buddhism, the way it's explained is it's a mental state, a mental factor. And it can be towards a person or any kind of object like food and music and so on. And there's an element of exaggeration, that the object appears much more wonderful, much more beautiful, fantastic, necessary for my happiness than it really is. So our mind kind of makes a story about the object. This is wonderful. This is fantastic. This is going to bring me happiness. I want this to be there forever. I never want to separate from it. So then that can cause our mind to want to hang on to it and hold on to it and never be separated from it. And so there's an element of exaggeration and sometimes even projection, projecting things that aren't really there, and maybe also ignoring things that aren't there. Denying things that are there we don't want to see. So it's like our mind can make the object into something that's 100% wonderful and perfect, and that's probably not realistic. Like I met a woman who said that she was married to this man and she thought he was like a Greek god. He was just so wonderful and so perfect. She adored him. She worshipped him. And he himself recognized that she was exaggerating, that she didn't have a correct view of him. And he was trying to tell her, I'm not really like that. But she didn't want to believe him. And then finally she kind of woke up, the bubble burst, and she saw him the way he really was. And then she didn't like him anymore. So they got a divorce. So that's kind of... And then she became a nun. Does that sound familiar? So that's kind of the worst case scenario of what can happen with attachment. But even if you stay together, if you manage to survive, like my parents, they stayed together until the end. But sooner or later, you have to separate. You have to separate from that person. You can't stay with them forever. And the same with objects. You know, we can't keep things. What does they say? We can't take it with us. You can't take it with you. So there will always be a separation from the object of attachment. And the stronger the attachment, the more painful that will be when we do have to separate. So that's one of the main reasons why attachment is considered negative. It's not negative like, oh, it's bad to have attachment. I mean, it's just normal. Human beings, samsaric beings. But it's a cause of suffering. That's the point. It causes suffering. And so it's really important to investigate that, to check if that's true or not. Look at your own life, your own experience. Look at the experience of others. Don't just think, oh, Buddha said it's bad to have attachment, therefore I shouldn't have attachment. That's not going to work. We have to come to that awareness ourselves by looking, by investigating, checking our experience. And it's very hard not to have attachment. Like I said before, we have to gain the realization of emptiness to be free of it. So, then, yeah, but at least if we can recognize that it's problematic and apply antidotes, we can decrease it, we can manage it. And even with this thing about the mother and child, I think we would say, you know, in Buddhism, that the mother doesn't have to have attachment for her child. I mean, most mothers do, of course. We're human beings. But if it was a bodhisattva mother, I mean, she would have love and compassion, selfless love and compassion for her child, and she would still take care of her child. So it's not like absolutely necessary from the Buddhist point of view to have attachment in order to have healthy relationships and raise children and so on. You can do that with selfless love and compassion. Okay, I prefer to do shorter periods of meditation, separating shamatha from analytical. Do you have comments? Yeah, actually, there's different ways you can do meditation. You can have just a separate session of shamatha meditation, and then stop that, and then another time do an analytical meditation. So you can do that if you prefer. And you can also combine them. For example, before doing an analytical meditation, it could be helpful to do some meditation on the breath for a while to get your mind calmed down, settled down, so it's in a more focused state to do your analytical meditation. And it's also recommended that when we do an analytical meditation, the idea is to get some kind of feeling, some kind of insight into the topic. Like if you're meditating on the precious human life, you may get a sense of, wow, yeah, my life is really precious. I really want to use it well. So that's like a little spark of insight, a little aha moment. And it's recommended that we stop analyzing, stop thinking, and just focus on that experience. Stay with that experience as long as we can, even if it's just a few minutes, a few seconds. Kind of soak the mind in that experience. So in other words, doing stabilizing meditation on that aha moment. So there's different ways that you can work with these two kinds of meditation. So whatever you find works best for you. Okay, then the last one up here is what to do when your meditation object isn't working, but you shouldn't change it partway through the sit. Where does flexibility and working with different energy levels or whatever is arising come into play with stabilizing concentration? A kind of complex question. Yeah, it's kind of a lot of different things. What to do when your meditation object isn't working, but you shouldn't change it partway through the sit? Well, I mean, one thing would be just to check what's going on. Why isn't this working? Like, try to understand. Is it because you have aversion to that meditation object? Is it stirring things up in you? So that itself could be interesting to look at. That was one of the things I read yesterday in that quote from the sutra. One of the things Buddha recommended is to just look at that thought and where is that coming from? Why is that thought coming up in the mind? So that way you learn more about yourself and about your mind and what makes you tick. For example, I was raised a Catholic, and one of the things I didn't really like about Catholicism was hell. And then when I came to Buddhism, and I thought, oh, Buddhism is so wonderful. I love Buddhism. And then, oh no, they got hell too. So I wasn't too happy when I was told to meditate on the hell realms. And I still have a lot of resistance to that. But I look at that, I look at what's going on in my mind. Why do I have resistance? And what can I do with this? How can I deal with this? So that way I've learned more about my mind, and I've also learned more about the Buddhist teachings and how to work with them and how to fit them with my mind, my way of thinking in a way that works for me. And it's an evolving thing, we are changing all the time. And so as we are changing, the way we understand the meditation topics is also going to change. And so, yeah, there is a need to be flexible and not rigid, I probably don't meditate in exactly the same way that my teacher meditates, who comes from Tibet and comes from a very different background and so on. But I'm not my teacher. I'm an American, California, hippie, Catholic. I have all this kind of stuff in my background. So I have to, I'm bringing that in. I can't just shut that off, make that disappear and be a totally new person. So we have to work with what we come with. Our conditioning, our experiences, plus our karma from past lives. We have our own individual stuff. And so we have to, work with that and work with the meditation topics and find a way that works. The whole point, you have to remember, the whole point of meditation is to bring about a positive transformation of our mind, to make our mind more compassionate, more loving, more wise, more patient, have these positive qualities, in an increased way as much as possible, and decrease the negative aspects, the anger, the attachment, the selfishness. So that's the whole point. So if you understand the purpose of meditation, and then, apply that in your own meditation practice. Each person is going to be meditating in their own way. Each person is following the path in their own way. There isn't one fixed way that everyone has to do exactly the same. And something else just popped up in my mind too. Lama Yeshe was once asked by a student, how do you know if you're meditating correctly, if your meditation is going in the right direction? And he said, if you see that you're becoming more kind, more helpful, having better relationships with other people, that shows that your meditation is doing well. You're doing well in your meditation. On the other hand, if you're becoming more angry, more selfish, more unkind and nasty to other people, something's wrong. So I really like that answer, because meditation isn't about getting fantastic experiences and lights and visions and floating into space and so on. It's about being a good human being and being able to relate to other human beings and other living beings with compassion and with kindness. So if we can see that happening, of course it's not going to happen right away. It will take time, slowly, bit by bit. But if we can see that we are becoming kinder and more compassionate, then that's a good sign. We're going in the right direction, doing it right. So I hope that answers that question. And we've run out of time. Okay, maybe one more.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment about attachment. I suffered from attachment for a while, and I discovered what it entailed was I lost my freedom. because I thought that I couldn't be happy without the object I was attached to. And it took me a while to realize that. And once I gave up the attachment, I felt such relief and freedom that it was a very good thing. So attachment entails loss of freedom. I just wanted to say that.
That's a great insight. That is wisdom. Buddha would be very happy. Buddha would be applauding. But yeah, sometimes it takes a while to get to that, to realize that. But it's definitely true. But then that doesn't mean you push everybody away and you can't enjoy anything anymore. It doesn't mean that. We can still enjoy our relationships. We can still enjoy food and beauty of nature and so on, but without attachment, although it's not easy to do, but it's possible. You just try to enjoy things, but without grasping. Because it does, it's like glue. It's like it's super glue, you get stuck to that object of attachment. You're not free anymore. I like to think of a fish. Fish is swimming around in the water free, and then sees this shiny little thing on the end of a hook, on the end of a line. Doesn't see the line, sees that shiny thing, goes for it, grabs it, and then it's stuck. It's lost its freedom. And maybe it's life. So that's what happens with attachment. We grab onto an object of attachment, we lose our freedom. Okay, so we'll end there and do some dedication. So there's still one more meditation before lunch, but I hope what you've learned things here that are helpful for you, and you will continue to practice and continue coming back for recharge.